Terrell Owens played for 5 teams in 15 seasons. Every one of them called him a locker room cancer while having their best offensive output with him there.
Touchdown to Terrell Owens.
So why did everyone keep signing him? And why did everyone keep acting surprised when the same thing happened again? How can the same man be both the problem and the proof? This isn't just a football story. It's a story about what happens when someone refuses to perform gratitude they don't feel. And to understand where that refusal came from, you have to go back to Alexander City, Alabama. Terrell Owens grew up in his grandmother's house with strict rules and protective walls. The kind of household where respect wasn't optional. His mother worked to keep them fed while his grandmother made sure they stayed out of trouble. From the outside, it looked like a normal childhood, except for one detail. His biological father lived across the street, 20 yards away, raising a different family. L.C. Russell was a man who lived in the same neighborhood and pretended not to know him. He saw Terrell every single day walking to school, playing in the yard, growing up, and he chose to act like he didn't exist. But when Terrell was 10 years old, he found out. Someone in the neighborhood pulled him aside after he'd developed feelings for a girl. An innocent crush. The kind kids have before the world gets complicated. That's when she learned she was his half-sister, but they shared the same father, and that the man responsible had been watching both of them grow up from across the street without saying a word. He learned early that the world would withhold what you deserved until you demanded it. So Terrell learned how to build walls, protect himself, and perform at the highest level, and refused to apologize for asking to be valued the same way everyone else was. What the NFL didn't know was that the same emotional armor making him difficult to manage was inseparable from what made him impossible to stop. And over 15 seasons, every team that signed him was about to find out the same thing. You couldn't have one without the other. But stop here for a second. Before anyone talks about what T.O. cost teams, look at what he built them. San Francisco drafted him in the 3rd round in 1996 out of Tennessee Chattanooga, a school most people couldn't find on a map. Nobody was projecting him as a franchise player. But by 2000, defensive coordinators were staying up late at night, game planning entire schemes around number 81. From 2000 to 2002, he caught 290 passes for over 4,000 yards and 42 touchdowns in 3 seasons. The 49ers offense didn't just get better. It became appointment television. Now, Steve Young was gone and Jeff Garcia was quarterback. In January 1999, nobody expected San Francisco to win at Lambeau Field in the playoffs. 4th quarter, clock winding down, season hanging in the balance. Here's what was at stake. If San Francisco loses this game, they go home and T.O. stays a talented receiver with questions about whether he can deliver in the biggest moment. But if he makes this play, everything changes about how the league season. So Garcia throws a prayer into the end zone with 3 Packer defenders surrounding T.O., and he comes down with it. Game over, season saved, and the entire league just realized they were dealing with something different. But that was just the beginning. Then came the star incident in Dallas. On September 24th, 2000, T.O. scores a touchdown and sprints to midfield, stands on the Cowboys logo, and spreads his arms wide. The crowd erupts while Cowboys running back Emmitt Smith responds by celebrating on the star himself after his own touchdown. Later in the same game, when T.O. scores again and returns to the star, Cowboys safety George Teague sprints across the field and levels him right there, sending the same message about respect not being something you ask for politely. San Francisco's offense led the league in passing 5 times with him on the field. He finished 2nd in franchise history in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. When contract disputes finally broke the relationship in 2004, the 49ers offense collapsed without him. So Philadelphia comes calling. Andy Reid's offense has been good for years, and Donovan McNabb was developing into a legitimate star. But with T.O., they became unstoppable. In 2004, McNabb threw 31 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions with a franchise record passer rate. He became the first quarterback in NFL history to throw over 30 touchdowns and fewer than 10 interceptions in a single season. The Eagles start 13-1, their best record in franchise history. They win the NFC East by 7 games, the biggest margin the division had ever seen. Then, in December, he takes a horse collar tackle that shatters his ankle and fractures his fibula. Doctors say his season was over. The Super Bowl is 7 weeks away, and recovery time for that injury is typically 3 to 4 months. Little did anyone know that he had no intention of sitting it out. 7 weeks later, the question wasn't whether Philadelphia could win against New England. It was whether T.O. could even walk onto the field. The trainers wrap his ankle before kickoff, and the painkillers are working overtime. If he can't go, the Eagles' offense loses its most dangerous weapon against a Patriots defense that already knows how to take away everything else. But if he plays through it on a broken leg that hasn't healed, he might never be the same player again. He goes out there anyway. In Super Bowl 39, the Eagles versus the Patriots, and T.O. catches 9 passes for 122 yards on that broken leg. The Eagles lose 24-21, but T.O. is the only reason they stay close enough to have a chance at the end. So a year later, the front office suspends him, sends him home, and calls him a cancer. In the same season, he dragged them to a Super Bowl on one functioning leg. Now Dallas comes calling. It's 2006, and the Cowboys haven't been relevant in a decade. Tony Romo was an undrafted backup trying to prove he belonged, and championships felt like ancient history. Here's what people forget. Everyone expected the drama and problems that followed T.O. everywhere else. Then 2007 happens, and the Cowboys go 13-3. Their best record since the 1992 Super Bowl team. They score 455 points, second in the entire league. Romo threw 36 touchdowns, a franchise record at the time. And Owens catches 81 passes for 1,355 yards and 15 touchdowns. Also a Cowboys record. 13 Pro Bowlers on that roster. First team All-Pro honors for number 81. The most dangerous version of the Dallas Cowboys anyone had seen in years. But those catches came with a cost. Corners were jamming him at the line, safeties delivering shots over the middle, and defensive ends chasing him down on screen. The hits receivers absorb don't make the highlight reels, but they add up over 15 seasons. Receivers absorb punishment differently than quarterbacks. Quarterbacks get flags when defenders breathe on them. Receivers get told to run across the middle into coverage and take whatever's coming. And T.O. did that for 15 seasons while being told he should be grateful for the opportunity to do it. Here's what nobody asked publicly. If he made every quarterback better and every offense more dangerous, what exactly was the problem? The NFL has a word for players who ask for contract renegotiation. Difficult, selfish, or cancer. But it has completely different words for owners who relocate franchises, cut veterans on the morning a season starts, and structure guaranteed money to disappear the second a player gets injured. So T.O. internalized the same logic. He watched teams make ruthless decisions and decided to make his own. The difference was that when he did it, they pathologized him for it. Now, here's the craziest part. In September 2006, Dallas police were called to T.O.'s residence. The initial report says rescue workers responded to an attempted suicide by prescription pain medication. The report says his publicist described him as depressed, and that he answered yes when asked if he was trying to harm himself. But within hours, the story shifts. T.O. and his publicist deny the unalive attempt, saying he accidentally mixed painkillers prescribed for a broken finger with supplements. By the next day, Dallas police reclassified the incident as an accidental overdose and closed their investigation. The official story changed 3 times in 24 hours. But what stayed the same was how fast the Cowboys moved to distance themselves. His publicist ended up on television defending his character. The entire conversation became about whether T.O. was mentally unstable instead of what had actually happened to him. The system revealed itself in that moment through how quickly it moved to protect the narrative instead of the person. But here's what nobody expected. Years later, researchers at Boston University studied the brains of deceased NFL players. Out of 111 former players, 110 show signs of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. Now, early stage CTE is associated with something called neurobehavioral dysregulation, impulsive behavior, aggression, explosive reaction, difficulty controlling emotion. The exact behaviors the league had spent years calling character flaws. CTE can only be diagnosed after death. So for decades, the NFL pathologized symptoms it couldn't see as personality defects. Players who struggled emotionally were labeled difficult, selfish, or problematic in the locker room. The same league that later admitted the connection between head trauma and behavioral issues had spent years diagnosing T.O.'s struggles as moral failure. They wrote it off as a character problem without ever asking what football had done to him first. That's not a defense of every choice he made. It's a question about who got to write the diagnosis and why they felt so confident doing it without asking better questions. When 2016 came around, Terrell Owens became eligible for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, second all-time in receiving touchdowns when he retired. Numbers that aren't up for debate. He didn't get in. When 2017 came around, he still didn't get in. Then, when 2018 came around, his third year of eligibility, here's what was at stake. If he gets in on the third ballot, the voters proved their point and made him wait long enough to show who was really in control. But if he doesn't get in, his career becomes a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't play by the rules. Finally, the call came. The difference was that T.O. never performed the apology tour. He never pretended to be grateful for being undervalued. The delay wasn't about football. It was about whether he'd learned his lesson and finally became the version of himself that made other people comfortable. But he didn't. So when the Hall of Fame finally called in 2018, T.O. made a decision. He wasn't going to Canton. This is where everything changes. Instead, he held his own induction ceremony at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, his alma mater, 600 miles from the Hall of Fame. The school nobody thought would produce an NFL legend. 3,000 people showed up. His mother, Marilyn Owens Hurd, presented him with his gold Hall of Fame jacket. The woman who raised him in Alexander City, while his father chose a different family across the street. The ceremony started at 3:17 p.m. because he was the 317th inductee into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the school renamed a campus street, Terrell Owens Way. For the first time in the entire narrative, he controlled the room completely. During his speech, he didn't back down. He called the voting process flawed, said the voters weren't aligned with the Hall of Fame's mission, and didn't apologize for demanding what he earned or for refusing to pretend otherwise. But the armor wasn't the problem. The armor was the point. We've all worked somewhere where someone was called difficult because they asked for what they were worth. The real question isn't whether that person was hard to manage. The question is whether the room got quieter after they left or whether it suddenly had less to say. The kid who watched his father choose a different family across the street grew up to play on 5 teams that all said they didn't need him right up until they did. The teams all complained about disruption while posting their best offensive numbers with him on the field, then called him the problem while reaching heights they'd never seen before and haven't seen since. The contradiction was never about football. It was about a league that couldn't handle someone who refused to be grateful for being used. So, was Terrell Owens a locker room cancer? Teams he played for got better with him, and the quarterbacks who threw to him had career years. Both the numbers and the wins proved it. The contradiction was never his, it was theirs. So, if this story hits differently, hit that like button, comment on what you want us to cover next, and subscribe for more stories like this. You won't want to miss them.